So Snow White was directed by Mark Webb and it stars Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot. And in this movie, it's a Disney live-action remake of the 1937 animated classic that started it all, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. If you don't know the plot of that movie, an evil queen learns that Snow White is going to take up her reigns of being the fairest of them all in her kingdom, so she banishes her. Snow White takes refuge with a group of dwarves who try to hide her, and we have a movie. So this was a movie that I was not looking forward to for a few reasons. Number one, admittedly, I was not really a big fan of the original Snow White. I know it's a classic, I always respected it, but I haven't watched that movie since I was a kid. And I rewatched it again recently to kind of prepare for this movie, and I actually respect it more as an adult now that I actually kind of like understand it a lot more. And I kind of feel like I took it for granted a little bit. So there's that. The main reasons I was not really looking forward to it included the fact that I'm not really a fan of Disney live action remakes anymore. I thought it was cool for a while that they were kind of making all these into live action and such, and then they just keep missing the point of all the remakes and they keep just getting worse in my opinion. And another reason was that the trailers themselves did not look very good. They looked very made for TV, or in this case made for Disney Plus. It looked pretty bad, honestly. Like it kind of looked like they were trying to take the storyline of Snow White and the Huntsman with the tone of Mirror Mirror. I don't know if anyone else remembers that year where there were two Snow White movies that came out back to back, but it's kind of like they made those two movies into one with Snow White. And also, I was not looking forward to being part of the conversation. Obviously, if you haven't heard at this point, there's been a ton of controversy surrounding this movie, from the people who were cast in this movie to the comments that were made about this movie, about the original Disney movie. And I'm just getting so annoyed with people kind of focusing their hatred of this movie without even seeing the movie based on things that people said. And look, I'm going to talk about the movie more. Definitely going to talk about the movie over the controversies because I feel like that's only fair. I'm going to treat this movie as I would any other movie. I'm not being paid by anyone to say these things, and it feels weird that I have to say that in this day and age. But here we are. And if I'm being honest, this movie is not particularly good. This movie can be laughable at times. At no point was I really like enjoying it, but I just felt this was not good. It's not awful for the reasons that people have been making it out to be, but if I'm being honest, it's not really worth recommending that much. So, is there anything in this movie that is actually good? A few things. Rachel Zegler is actually surprisingly good in this movie. I thought her character was actually at least interesting. Her voice is actually really good. And if you have not seen her West Side Story movie, she's fantastic in that movie. Give it a chance. I actually liked her character. The production design and the costume design is very interesting as well. I do like some of the costumes that they have for the Evil Queen. I also like the production designs of the Dark Forest and also pretty much everything in the Dark Forest with like the dwarves cottage and such. That was very well done. The actual kingdom itself kind of looks a little drab, but I guess it's like, oh, that's because the Evil Queen kind of took over and everything kind of looks sad now. See, wish you can do that. But anyway, moving on. There are a few good callbacks to the original animated movie, which I did like. It's like, okay, I recognize that from the animated movie. Kind of like, again, I rewatched it again to prepare for this movie. So now that I see it in this movie, it's like, oh, I remember that. That was really cool. It's like, that's the kind of callbacks I want to see in this movie, not, just direct lines from the original movie. And also, there are a few intriguing ideas in this movie. I won't spoil too many of them, but there's like, they kind of bring up apples a few times in this movie, and there's one that was really clever with the queen. It's like, okay, that was actually clever. Probably one of the more clever things about this movie, but we'll get into that. Also, admittedly, I think the movie does admittedly get better as it kind of gets going. At times, it's kind of generic, and then there's a lot of uncanny stuff with the dwarves, which again I'll talk about. But I'm actually my friend and I we were the only ones in the theater watching this movie, and we were kind of laughing at various times. But by the end, we were like, I would say we weren't as laughing as much, and we were at least kind of invested a little bit. So there's that. It's like it's a little rough to get through at first, but by the end, it's at least tolerable. But let's talk about some of the things I don't like about this movie. First off, let's talk about the dwarves themselves. Not only are most of them just ungodly, like they just look so uncanny, that's just so wrong. What makes it worse is that they're kind of side characters in this movie. Yeah, Snow White and the Seven Dwarves, minus the dwarves. Like, the dwarves don't really have much to do in this movie, if I'm being honest. They kind of have, like, funny comedic bits that aren't really that funny, but they're kind of side characters in their own movie, and I felt like that was awful. But, it helped. But you know what? They have more character than some of these other underwritten characters. Like, So this may be a spoiler, but it's not really that big of a deal because it doesn't really configure into the plot in some way. Snow White meets a thief, and he has seven friends that are kind of like thieves as well. So it's like, oh, she has the seven dwarfs, he has these seven thieves. These thieves have no character whatsoever. Some of the worst written characters I've seen. At least sometimes there's effort put into some of these characters, and there is none in this movie. None. Wow. You aren't even trying. It's pretty bad. But let's also talk about Gal Gadot for a moment. She is pretty bad in this movie. There are times where I was watching this and I'm like, this could have been really good if she was like, playing up the campiness. Or maybe if like some other actress was taking over and kind of played into like the campiness a little bit. I felt like something was just off in her performance. Not only was she not campy enough, she was not scary enough, she was not fun enough. Her line reading at times kind of made me laugh, and I'm like, oh no, 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 no. She was pretty bad. Her singing is also lackluster as well. I guess it's not the worst singing I've heard. Again, Pierce Brosnan and Mamma Mia kind of set the bar really low. Let's talk about the visuals again. Oh man, some of the visuals are pretty bad. Again, the dwarves themselves, they are uncanny, and sometimes they just get really in your face, especially the first time you see them. It's pretty bad and kind of annoying. Yeah, the visuals aren't really that great, and that's really the only visual thing about the movie. Uh, it also kind of borrows heavily from a lot of Disney movies, which I felt like was kind of an odd choice, but like the thief kind of reminded me a little bit of Flynn Rider from Tangled. And also, I made a joke about Wish at one point to my friend, and it does kind of feel Wish. It was so weird. It's like I get that this movie was kind of being made around the same time as Wish, so they didn't know what was going on. But it's like there are times where I'm watching, I'm like, why am I thinking of Wish all of a sudden? I'm like, I did not want to think about that movie ever again, but here we are. Thank you, Snow White. And also, there are a lot of inconsistencies in the plot that just kind of annoyed me. Like, again, doesn't really matter in the plot. There was one moment where Rachel Zegler mentions that, the princess will do something. It's like, aren't you the princess? And then it's like, wait, did the queen remove her memory or something? It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Did she pull an Ursula from the live action Little Mermaid? Doesn't really make a lot of sense. Um, but then she's reminded that she is Snow White. Pretty much right afterwards. Am I just missing something? I don't know. Also, there's like a scene where a couple of dwarves are making fun of Dopey at one point, and one of them's like, "Hey, you shouldn't make fun of Dopey." And then they get into like this whole, basically something happens that's supposed to be comical that makes Dopey look like the fool again, and everyone's laughing, including the one who's just saying, "Don't make fun of Dopey." That is literally in the same scene. How inconsistent can you get? And also, like, there's also a main plot. It's like it kind of just feels like stuff kind of happens for no reason. A lot of stuff is kind of just brought up, and it's just that's kind of the main focus now. And I'm just like, when did this come in? I don't understand it, and it's really wild that you just jump to this conclusion right away. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. When you see the movie, you'll kind of see what I'm talking about. Also, the third act itself, like pretty much the last 10 minutes, felt so lackluster. Like, very boring. I would go back and watch the original animated movie again because at least the last, 10 minutes or so, that's when the movie really shines. But this movie, the last 10 minutes are some of the worst. Like, they're pretty bad. Like, some of the visuals are pretty bad in the last 10 minutes. Basically, the end result is just kind of very lackluster, and I just did not care as much. And also, what I kind of got by the end of this movie is that, without a doubt, like a lot of these Disney remakes, I just felt like it was just so soulless. Like, there's hardly any effort being put into this movie. There's hardly any reason for this movie to exist. There's even a moment in this movie where, pretty early on, the dwarves are kind of like in their mine carts, and it kind of looks like a roller coaster, so it kind of looks like that ride in Disney World and such. And I'm like, okay, what was the point of that? Just to kind of be an advertisement for Disney World? Okay. This movie, I wouldn't go as far as to say it's awful. Because again, it can be kind of fun at times, sometimes for the wrong reasons, and admittedly, it can kind of get better for the most part as it gets going, with the exception of the last 10 minutes again. But I will say again, Rachel Zegler is actually one of the better parts about this movie. The costume design and production design is very good. The callbacks are very interesting. And the musical numbers themselves are fine when you're watching them. forgot to mention that the musical numbers are okay when you're watching them on screen, but I don't think you'll really be humming the tunes afterwards. My friend kind of turned to me afterwards and said, I'm really missing Wicked right now. It's like, yeah, Wicked had really good musical numbers, and these musical numbers are okay, but the lyrics themselves are just not very interesting or memorable, or just they're kind of bland. They're kind of forgettable for the most part, which is really upsetting because the people who did music for movies like Greatest Showman, which also admittedly not a good movie in my opinion, but at least the music kind of stood out. So it's kind of weird, but pretty much everything else about this movie I felt was kind of off. The dwarves, the side characters, Gal Gadot, some of the visuals were just off. The third act was just a complete waste of time. Um, it borrows heavily from a lot of Disney movies. There are so many inconsistencies in the plot. And again, it just felt soulless, which again, I can't really be surprised by because a lot of these Disney remakes are pretty soulless, and I get it that these are made to kind of just make money, and I get it studios are trying to make money, so they're trying to make these movies and such, but I would wish that the people who are making these movies would put in a little bit more effort when making these movies. Because I wouldn't go as far as to say to skip it, because at least some of the performances are fine, and again, it can be watchable at times. This would probably be really, really good if you were watching it for the first time on Disney Plus. So I'll give it 1.5 out of 4 stars. Stream it. I'm trying to be as fair as possible. This movie's not very good, but it's not very good for all the reasons I tried to list. And I feel like I'm being way nicer than a lot of people are probably going to be with this movie. So, what is your least favorite or favorite Disney live action remake? Or what is a movie that you want to see Disney remake in a live action? Comment down below, subscribe to the channel. This is Pat, and stay safe.